Hey guys, it's Sheri Ann Richerson from experimentalhomesteader.com.
And Jeffrey Rhoades.
And I need to tell you, we did receive this item for free in exchange for our honest review. All opinions are our own.
Okay, so I've played jigsaw puzzle with my countertop. I had a number of cut pieces and broken pieces for my countertop. I've spent some time getting everything glued together, but I still have some gaps in my countertop. So we're using a lightweight spackle, and we're going to fill in the gaps of the countertop, and this way I will have a smooth surface that I can work with to do the refinishing. Now I'm using a probably larger than what I really need putty knife here. I am using a plastic putty knife. I really like this style, and it makes it, using this large one makes it really quick. I don't have to be exact about getting all of it off because I will be sanding the surface, and so I'll sand off the excess. But this is a fast drying spackle that'll dry quickly. I'll be able to get started here just real shortly. The spackling actually says that it can be painted over within, I think it said like 30 minutes maybe, if it's a non-oil based. So, you know, this won't take me long to be able to move on to the next stage, which will be actually the sanding and getting the surface prepared for the actual refinishing. So I've put my pieces together. I got it all glued. I got it all spackled. Now I'm doing a quick hand sand, scuff sand, trying to take a little of the excess spackle off and get the surface ready for the base coat. Up here, I need to do it by hand. Once I get to the flat surface here, I'm going to use a electric sander because it'll be a lot quicker and easier to just zip through and get this sanded down just a little bit. And so give us a couple minutes and I'll be ready for the electric sander, and I'll show you what that looks like as I'm doing it. So I'm going to use a hand electric sander to scuff sand the upper surface of this and try and get a nice flat, even feel. So I'll show you this here. Okay, so I've scuff sanded my surface and then washed it down so as to get rid of all the excess debris and dust particles. So now I've opened up my base coat and give it a good stir. I'm going to pour some into my paint pan, and I'm going to use the brush that comes with initially because I'm going to do the corners and the rougher areas to get with the roller with the brush. And then I will come back to using the roller. Okay. So I'm just going to start off with the upper edging here and just brush it on, and I'll come back and give it a little bit thicker coating here in a moment. I'm just trying to get a nice even layer on here initially. And that is actually starting to look pretty nice already.
Yeah.
I am not a professional painter.
This is most definitely a fairly easy DIY project so far.
Okay, so now I'm rollering the larger surfaces, and it's going on nice and simple. You do want to make sure that you mask off any areas where you don't want the paint, and while you don't have to remove your basin, because I had to do a lot of repair work on the countertop, I took out our sink basin, and I think that's going to make it a lot easier for me personally to paint where the sink basin goes. They recommend rollering downward on your edges. Make sure you're doing a downward motion with it, and they do suggest going over it multiple times, giving it a good thick coating, because that is the area that you want your most durability, because it's a heavy usage area. Okay, so we took a break after the first coat. It has to dry for about 30 minutes before you can put a second coat on, and it wound up looking pretty good. It was mostly dry in most areas. There was still a couple of small spots where it was a little damp, but that was okay. So at the moment, I'm getting the second coat put on here. Like I said before, I took the sink basin out because I had to patch and jigsaw puzzle the countertop back together, and so this is making it a lot easier to paint this area and have a nice completely coated countertop. So, but you can, if you can't remove or you don't want to remove your sink basin, just tape off around it with painter's tape, and you can just paint around it, and it works out really well that way too. This stuff is going on really nice. You want to make sure that you're rolling downward on your front edges, and make sure that you're coating them really well. A nice thick coating on them. This gives extra durability to them. This is the area that gets your most traffic, and so you're more likely to have some wear through. So you want to have a nice thick covering to prevent that. Now I'm getting into the areas where I'm going to have to use the paintbrush again. But I did clean up my roller between coatings. This is something that you want to do. Since you're going to have to wait 30 minutes, you clean up your roller. It does come with 3 rollers. There's one for the base coat, one for the stone coat, and one for the finish coat. So you want to reuse the rollers that you have for the various coatings. So in between, you want to use, just hot soapy water and clean up the rollers. And this has turned out really nice. I'm actually getting good coverage with the roller, and I may not actually need to come back over it with the paintbrush, which is really nice. I like this. I really like the system. I love this little paint pan, and I've got a couple of small areas where I've still got some show through that I'm going to try and touch up. I'm trying to get a nice even coating on everything. There we go. That's better. We're definitely doing downward over the edging and getting a nice thick coating on it to make sure that, since it's basically a heavy traffic, it's going to come into contact with a lot more stuff. You want to have a nice thick layer and well protected. Okay, so I've waited 2 hours, giving this a chance to dry, and I'm getting started on the first coating of the second stage, which is the stone coating. I'm starting with the brush, doing the areas that are going to be harder to do than the roller. Now it does say when you go to open the can and stir the paint, it says to stir from the bottom. So you use your stir stick and you stir it from the bottom to bring up the bits of stone into the top of your paint. And then you want to dab into your corners and areas with the paintbrush, the hard to reach spots. You dab the stone particles in there, and you want to get try to get a nice even coating. And like I said before, the back wall for us doesn't matter. We're getting ready to cover it up. But you want to try and dab it and make an even coating. And so in between stages, you definitely want to clean up your paintbrush, your paint pan, your rollers, keep everything cleaned up and allow it to dry basically between your coats. This we'll put this first coat on, and then we'll wait probably about 2 hours, give it a chance to dry a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll put the next coat on, and we'll just Then we'll let it dry for 24 hours. And then we'll come along and we'll sand it, and then we'll top coat it. The sanding will be to bring out the flecks of stone and make it nice and pretty. Okay, so now I'm going to get started on the rolling, and you're supposed to just kind of do it in an X pattern and just spread it out there. And just paint away. Just trying to get a nice even coating. Okay, so it's been 2 hours since I put the first coat of the stone paint on. I've refilled my paint tray, and I'm using the brush to do the areas that are a little harder to do than the roller. So we're going to dab this stuff in here. We're trying at this point mainly just to cover up those spots that seem a little thin. So, and that's, you know, kind of obvious to see in some ways. But we'll just dab it in there, fill in those spots, try and keep it a nice thin layer again, and just work our way around, same as we did before. And once we're done painting this part of it, then we let it set for 24 hours before we are going to sand it and then top coat it. Okay, so I've been using the roller, covering up the entire area, covering over those areas that were a little bit thin maybe. Now I'm just kind of spreading it out a little bit and making sure I've got a nice even coating on here. And we're going to let this set here in a minute, and it'll set for 24 hours. Now, it was mentioned that this will harden pretty good, and what we can do is we can, in 4 hours, it will have hardened up and dried enough that we can go ahead and start sanding on it. And you'll want to use the 60 grit coarse sandpaper first. You sand on it, then come back with the 120 grain or 120 grit and finish it up. Give it a nice shiny finish, smooth finish. But it still needs to dry for 24 hours before we put the clear coat on it. I'm probably going to let it dry for more than 4 hours, but basically it was mentioned that within 4 hours it would be dry enough to sand on, and it would possibly be a little bit easier sanding. The longer it sits, the harder it's going to be, the more cured it's going to be, and so it'll take a little bit more sanding to get the polished look that you want. So I'm going to give it a little bit more time. I'm going to, use the sandpaper on it in the morning and get it sanded up, then cleaned up, and then I'll be able to get the the top coat on it tomorrow evening, and I love how it looks right now. It's looking great. I know that it's got a lot of texture to it right now. It's going to be kind of rough at the moment, but once I sand it, I think I'll get a lot of that roughness out, and I'll have a nice smooth surface. And I think it's got a lot of stone in it that's going to wind up sparkling really nicely.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
So, okay, so it's the next morning. It's been plenty of time for it to dry so that I can sand it. I still have several hours to go before I can top coat it, but we're going to do a little sanding on this and get it kind of sparkly and smoothed out so it'll be ready for the top coat. I am going to be wearing a sanding filter mask to prevent any dust that I might breathe. I am using a electric sander to do this. It's going to be faster to do the flat surface. I do have the sandpaper to do the edges and everything by hand, and once I've done the 60 grit coarse sandpaper, then I follow up with the 120, which is a smoothing and finishing sandpaper, and that'll bring out the sparkle and the texture better. So let me get my safety glasses and my filter mask on. Done a small area, and then I'm going to follow it up with the 120 sandpaper. And you can see how it's starting to bring out some of the sparkle. I'll use a shop vac to sweep up the dust, and then hit it with a damp cloth to wash away the excess. Okay, so it's been 24 hours. I have gotten since I painted, I've gotten it all sanded, and I'm getting started on the clear coat. And it says to start with the brush for the hard to reach areas, which is what I'm doing right here. It does say to make sure that you stir the paint thoroughly but gently, so as to not create air bubbles in the clear coat. And then you just apply it with some nice even strokes. Try and make it as a nice, even, clean, thin layer. And just it also says not to overwork the clear coat. If you overwork it, you can create extra bubbles in it as well, and make a uneven finish, basically a rougher finish. Okay, so now I'm applying to the larger areas with the roller, and just roll it on and try to get a nice even coating. Don't let it pool, but don't overwork it. Okay, so the first coat has had a chance to dry. So I'm getting ready to add the second coat of the clear coat. It looks great, and once I've applied this coat, then it'll just be allowed to dry. It has to dry for 24 hours, and then to fully cure, it has to be allowed to dry for 7 days. We can do a light use of the cabinetry. It's just, you know, we don't want to do too much to it until it's had a chance to completely cure over the 7 days. So you know, they recommend not using, you know, not putting anything hot on it. Use a trivet for pots and pans. But I'm back to, you know, just applying this with the brush, trying to get into the areas where the roller's not going to be easy. And like I said before, you don't want it to pool, so I'm just going to spread this out and just keep it going and make a nice smooth, even coating. Okay, so now I've moved on to the roller. I finished with the brush, and I'm just going back over, putting a second coat on this whole area, and we will have our countertop finished. And so just use the same techniques that you've been doing for applying the paint and the clear coat and everything, and just try not to overwork the clear coat, because you don't want to add bubbles to the surface, but you want to make a nice even coating over the whole thing. Hi there. So we've finished our countertop, and it looks really good. I'm really enjoying how this has turned out. We started off with a jigsaw puzzle of countertop pieces. I glued them all together, and the black, the refinish, really covers up a lot of the cracks. I mean, they're still a little bit visible if you really look close, but it really makes it look a lot better. And the black really sets off the copper of the sink. And I'm really happy with the way all of this turned out. It was actually pretty simple. It was kind of time consuming, because you did have to wait between coats of paint and finish and everything. But overall, it was actually a good process. It turned out really good. I struggled a little bit initially with getting through the finish of the old countertop, getting it scuffed up enough that we really felt that it was going to take the paint. But once I figured out how much pressure and everything I needed to use on the sandpaper to get it to go, it started going really easily. And all the rest of it was actually very nice, and I am really happy with the way this looks.
Yes, it's been very durable. We have tested it over a period of time to make sure that there wasn't going to be any peeling or other issues with it. It looks 1,000% better. And I highly encourage you, if you have problematic countertops and you want to do something to make them better, but maybe you're not to the point that you want to replace your countertops, to definitely check into this product and give it a try, because it's well worth the money and the time invested to end up with the result that we have.
Yeah, it's a much more inexpensive solution than buying all brand new countertops.
Yes, and even though we did receive this item for free, if I had to go out and buy this item and pay for it cash to get this result, I would definitely do that. So, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. We'd love to hear your comments below. We'd love to hear what you think of this transformation, because it really is an amazing transformation.
Yeah.
So, and we hope all of you have a really great night.